Have you ever been left out by your own family? Not because you did something wrong, but because they didn't think you were worth being there? Let me tell you what that feels like. And stick with me, because by the end of this story, they were standing in my living room, pretending they didn't know who I was. And if you've ever been the underdog, the black sheep, or the one they all thought would never make it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You're gonna love how this ends. It came on a Thursday afternoon. The kind of email that shows up with glittery gold trim and too much confidence. You're invited. Hawthorne McCoy Family Reunion, Charleston, South Carolina, July 15th weekend location. Private luxury lakehouse estate. I scrolled through the fancy graphics, champagne bubbles rising behind the cursive font. Family photos faded into the background like a slideshow. I kept looking, scanning the list of invitees. My name wasn't there. I refreshed the page. Nothing changed. Then, like clockwork, my cousin Tadeo Nash sent a DM. Hey Cam, just a heads up, this year's reunion is kinda upscale. I don't think it's really your scene anymore. Hope you understand. Hope I understand? I sat back in my chair, blinking at the screen. Tadeo, the same guy who once called my apartment cozy with air quotes, was now telling me I wouldn't fit in. And here's the wild part, I wasn't surprised. Not really. It wasn't the first time they made me feel like the outsider. I remembered a trip years ago. Big cabin in the mountains. Everyone had bedrooms. My Aunt Elena Sawyer looked me dead in the eye and said, "You might want to bring your own sleeping bag, Camila. You know, just in case." Like I was the family stray. They used to joke about how I was always renting. Always hustling. No mortgage, no husband, no real roots. Just me, my little apartment, and a dream they couldn't see past. But none of it ever really got to me, until now. Because this time? They sent out invitations, and didn't even bother to leave me out quietly. They rubbed it in. I clicked on the venue link, curious what kind of palace they were bragging about. Up popped a bright photo of a house I knew better than anyone. White columns. 2-story wraparound porch. Massive bay windows overlooking the lake. My smile came slow. Easy. Because that house was mine. One of my top-performing Airbnbs. They didn't even know. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of iced coffee, and whispered to myself, "You don't think it's my scene?" Then I laughed. Because if they were gonna walk into my house thinking I didn't belong, they were in for a weekend they'd never forget. People love to laugh at you when they think they know where your story ends. They laugh at your job, your rent, your dreams. And the whole time, they don't even see the foundation you're laying right under their nose. Let me tell you what mine looked like. I was 21 when everything changed. One semester away from finishing my business degree, and one phone call away from losing the one person who never made me feel like I had to prove anything. My grandmother, Miss Ora, had a stroke. And just like that, I dropped everything. Packed up my things. Moved back to Colombia. And became the full-time caregiver nobody in the family volunteered to be. Not Tadeo. Not Nova. Not Prince. They sent prayers in the group chat. I sent in-home nurses and handled the medical bills. I rented a tiny studio above a bakery. The kind where the heat knocks like it wants to fight you. One window, no washer, paint chipping around the edges. But I had what I needed, a mattress on the floor, Wi-Fi, and a notepad full of scribbled plans. During the day, I worked the front desk at a Holiday Inn. At night, I cleaned offices with a janitorial crew run by a guy named Malik who paid cash and let me bring my own mop. Weekends? I worked for a local property manager. Learning how to do everything from patching drywall to staging open houses. I didn't complain. Because I knew what I was doing. I wasn't lost. I was learning. But to the rest of my family? I was the sad little girl who never made it out. I'll never forget the summer barbecue at Aunt Elena's. I showed up late, in scrubs and sneakers, still smelling like lemon disinfectant. My cousin Prince Fraser looked me up and down and grinned. "Still on your hustle grind, huh? You got like 10 jobs or something?" Then Nova Molina, sipping rose from a plastic cup, added, "Let her live, Prince. Some people just like staying busy. Rent's not gonna pay itself." They both laughed like it was a sitcom. And me? I just smiled. Said nothing. Because the rental I'd just closed on that week was a 2-bedroom fixer in West Columbia that I bought for $43,000 at auction. And in 3 months, it would be my first Airbnb. But they didn't ask. They never asked. To them, I was just the girl who folded towels and took bus rides. And maybe that was my biggest advantage. Nobody saw me coming. Fast forward 3 years later, I'd flipped and refinanced 3 properties. Bought 2 more off-market. Cleaned them. Painted them. Installed Wi-Fi routers myself. I stayed up watching tutorials on plumbing repair instead of Netflix. Every dollar I made went back into a down payment. I learned zoning codes like love songs. And while they were posting vacations, I was building something permanent. By the time I turned 30, I owned 17 homes across 4 states, all paid off. No partners. No loans hanging over me. No applause. Just pure grit. And one of those homes? That big, beautiful lakefront estate they picked for the family reunion? That was my latest project. A restored antebellum mansion on Lake Moultrie, my most expensive flip yet. It took 6 months to gut, refinish, and restyle. Now it books out months in advance. Whitewashed exterior. Black iron lanterns. Cypress trees swaying out back like they're proud of me. I'd never planned for anyone in my family to step foot in that house. But the universe? It's got a funny way of handing you the mic you never begged for. They thought they picked that home because it looked exclusive. Because it screamed old money. What they didn't know. The money that built it wasn't old. It was new. Quiet. Earned. And mine. You know what's wild? People always assume silence means shame. But sometimes silence just means, "You'll see." They laughed when I had nothing. But now? They're about to toast champagne in a house they said I'd never afford to clean, let alone own. And I'm not going to stop them. Not yet. Because the best kind of revenge is making them comfortable, right before you flip the lights on. Some people throw tantrums when they're disrespected. Me? I just start making quiet moves. Because when you're the one holding the keys, you don't have to raise your voice to be heard. The booking came through on a Wednesday morning. Rio Pearson, my assistant, flagged the reservation with a little smirk on his face. "Hey, you're gonna want to see this," he said, stepping into my office holding his tablet like it was tea. The name on the booking? Kiara McCoy Events. Sounded fancy enough. Probably one of those boutique party planners who wear headsets and call themselves curators. But when we cross-checked the guest list with the calendar notes, there it was. Hawthorne McCoy Family Reunion. Attendees, Tadeo Nash, Nova Molina, Prince Fraser, Elena Sawyer. I didn't even need to scroll further. They'd booked the house. My house. I leaned back in my chair and just smiled. "Confirm it," I said. "Seriously?" Rio blinked. "You want to let them go through with it?" "Oh, I want them to have the full experience," I said, tapping the armrest of my chair. "But we're gonna add a little sparkle." That afternoon, we went to work. The smart locks were reprogrammed with fresh codes that would expire after 48 hours. The thermostat was set to adjust lighting and temperature based on guest movement. I added customized welcome notes and curated playlists that matched the exact time of day they'd arrive. Think, soft jazz and ambient warmth when they enter the foyer. I instructed Rio to add double-threaded Egyptian cotton sheets to every bedroom. And in the primary suite? A copy of Forbes' travel guide, open to an article I was quietly featured in last year, the one they never knew about. Outside, I called in Jet Lu, my groundskeeper. Jet was the kind of guy who didn't ask questions, just got things done. Tattoos down his forearms, always smelled like cedar and fresh mulch. We got guests coming in. The kind who pretend they don't know who pays for the grass they're walking on. Copy that, he nodded. Want me to edge the walkways? Edge them sharp enough to cut egos. He chuckled and got to work. That night, I stood in the upstairs hallway of the house, looking out over the lake as the sun dipped low. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't mad. I was ready. They'd walk through those doors thinking it was just another rental. They'd toast, brag, take selfies in the marble bathtub, and never once wonder who made it all possible. And that was the point. Because when people think you're beneath them, they never bother to look up. Just before leaving, I replaced the framed print in the dining room with a photo that looked like abstract art, until you looked close enough to realize it was a collage of all 17 of my rental properties. They wouldn't notice it at first. But later? Oh, they would. After everything was staged and flawless, I booked myself a small cottage across the road, nothing fancy, just cozy enough to watch the show. The cottage had a clear view of the lakehouse driveway. I'd see every car pull up. Every cousin stumble out in heels. Every fake hug. Every overpriced bag swinging from a shoulder like it meant something. At 9:12 p.m. that night, I texted Rio, let's raise the rate 30% for short-notice group bookings. Make sure they get the new invoice before checkout. He texted back with a gif of Beyoncé sipping tea. I smiled, set my phone down, and opened a bottle of wine. Tomorrow, the family that thought I didn't belong was going to spend the weekend celebrating on my dime. And they wouldn't even know it. Not yet. Because that's the thing about revenge. When you serve it warm, with Bluetooth surround sound and the lake view, it goes down even smoother. I didn't need them to clap for me. I didn't need them to say sorry. I just needed them to feel comfortable enough to let the mask slip. To show their real faces, right before I showed mine. And when I did? Trust me, no one would forget it. You ever watch people act like they own the place, while they're standing in your living room? It's wild. The confidence. The fake smiles. The name-dropping. The way they brag like no one's listening, because they think no one important is. That's what made watching this part so much fun. They started showing up around 3 p.m., right on schedule. The driveway filled with Tesla SUVs, shiny Range Rovers, and at least one matte black Porsche that still had the temporary tags on it. Designer luggage rolled across my slate stone walkway. Gucci belts, Balenciaga shades, and giant ego energy flooded through the front doors like a wave of curated arrogance. Tadeo Nash was the first one out of the car. He stepped out like he was walking a red carpet, sunglasses still on despite the shade, phone in hand. Yeah, this is the spot. Premium listing. Took some serious pulling strings to get it. No, it didn't. He booked it through a third-party vendor with a credit card I already had flagged for low limits and high risk. But sure. Let him cook. Nova Molina came strutting in next, all white linen and loud perfume, dragging a giant suitcase with a built-in charger. She stepped into the foyer, looked around at the custom lighting I personally picked out in Barcelona, and muttered, classy. But kind of basic. You can tell it's not really old money. I almost spit out my tea watching from the cottage. Basic? Sis, the mirror you're fixing your lipstick in was imported from Italy and cost more than your first car. Inside, the cousins scattered like influencers in a showroom. Prince Fraser jumped on one of the leather couches and posted a selfie with the caption, "Lakehouse vibes with the fam, generational wealth feels different." They posed by the stone fireplace I had designed myself. They laughed, they drank, they critiqued the flatware. Then someone found the soaking tub in the primary suite. They filled it with cheap champagne, popped a bottle, and took turns pouring it over their wrists like cologne. They used my bathtub like a club prop. My linens like stage curtains. And not one of them had a clue. I tapped into the live camera feed from the hallway. Everyone was everywhere. Opening cabinets. Snooping through drawers. Asking where the snacks were like the house owed them something. Then came the cherry on top. One of the junior assistants from the event team walked in, a kind woman named Marissa, holding a broom and dustpan. "Hi there. Just a quick sweep up before dinner, won't be long." Prince turned to her, waving dismissively like she was invisible. "Can you, not do this in the middle of our photo session?" Nova leaned in and whispered, loud enough for the hallway mic to pick it up, "Girl looks like she borrowed her whole uniform." I'd die if I ever had to do that job. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of my seat. You'd die? I lived in that job. That uniform was my first suit of armor. But I said nothing. Not yet. At 6:45 p.m., the light outside started to shift. That golden hour glow stretched across the lake, painting the windows warm. Inside, the chatter had turned to money. Tadeo was talking loudly about his crypto portfolio. Elena Sawyer was sipping wine and making passive digs at her daughter's public college choices. It was the same old story, status theater. Every sentence a flex. Every smile, a mask. And then, right on cue, Kate Mendez, the lead event planner, stepped into the room holding a sleek clipboard. "Just a quick heads up," she said, smiling. "The owner might be stopping by this evening, just to approve a few last-minute repairs. They're local." Tadeo barely looked up. "Tell them not to disturb us. We paid for the whole weekend. They can handle repairs after." Kate nodded politely. "Of course. I'll let them know." I smiled from the cottage. The sun had dipped just enough. It was time. At exactly 7 p.m., the motion sensor in the main living room triggered. The smart TV above the fireplace flickered on. First came the default screensaver, a calming lake view. Then the screen glitched, once, twice. Then shifted. Black background. White text. Slow. Deliberate. "Welcome to your reunion." The chatter died instantly. Everyone turned to the screen. "Hosted by the one you didn't invite." A pause. "Love, Camila Ware, owner." It was quiet at first. Just confusion. Then silence. Then gasps. Like the wind got sucked out of the room. Tadeo's face drained. He blinked at the screen, then whipped around toward the rest of the family. "Wait, what?" Nova froze, wine glass midair. Elena's jaw dropped, her hand covering her mouth like she'd seen a ghost. Someone whispered, "Camila owns this place?" The camera feed caught Prince slowly lowering his phone, screen still open to his generational wealth post. For the first time all day, nobody had anything slick to say. And I stood up from my seat at the cottage window, dusted off my pants, and said softly, "Let the tour begin." They thought they'd booked a weekend escape in someone else's empire. Turns out, they were standing in mine. And I hadn't even walked through the front door yet. Sometimes, the loudest moment in the room is silence. No yelling. No clapping back. Just the quiet hum of realization rolling over every face that once looked down on you. That's where I stepped in. And baby, I didn't walk. I glided. The front doors opened at exactly 7:05 p.m. And there I was. Wearing a clean white suit, crisp, tailored, and glowing under the golden chandelier light. Not flashy. Not loud. Just sharp. And undeniable. The sound of my heels on the marble floor echoed like a drumbeat in the silence. Every eye turned. Every jaw? Still hanging somewhere near the hors d'oeuvres table. I didn't rush. I didn't look around like I needed approval. I just walked to the center of the room, took a breath, and said, I figured if I couldn't be invited, I'd just host instead. Arthur Grant, the family patriarch, blinked as if he saw a ghost wearing designer. You own this place, he asked, voice cracking with disbelief. I turned to face him gently. And 16 others, I replied. Elena Sawyer dropped her wineglass. It shattered on the tile like punctuation. Tadeo's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Prince Fraser fumbled with his phone, trying to lock the screen like he could hide the post from earlier. And then, the screens lit up. Every TV, every tablet, every digital frame around the house switched over, one by one. Each played a short, looping clip. A sun-soaked loft in Miami, floor-to-ceiling windows, gold accents, ocean view. A color-drenched townhouse in New Orleans, with wrought iron balconies and hanging flowers. A beachfront bungalow in Tulum, the waves practically kissing the porch. Each one stamped with the name. Bliss Keys Rentals, by Camila, where the room was dead silent. You could hear the ice melt in the cocktail glasses. And then I spoke. You all called me poor. Said I'd never own a thing. But while you were calculating status, I was calculating returns. My voice didn't waver. My hands stayed loose at my sides. Because this wasn't revenge. Not really. It was revelation. I looked directly at Nova, whose face had gone pale. At Tadeo, who looked like he'd swallowed a rock. While you were laughing at my hustle, I was flipping properties. While you were mocking my rentals, I was building an empire. And while you were sipping wine on my porch, I was watching from across the street. Making sure every single one of you got what you came for. And then I turned to Kate Mendez, the event planner, who stood off to the side, eyes wide, clearly stunned by the show. I smiled. Kate, would you mind handing out the folders? She nodded, almost dazed, and handed a sleek navy blue folder to each adult guest. Inside? A thank you note for attending the reunion, a full invoice for the 3-day stay, updated with a 30% late booking surcharge, and a printed property map showing every home I currently owned. Arthur Grant thumbed through his copy slowly. You did all this, without telling anyone, he asked. I met his eyes, soft but sure. You never asked. There it was again. That silence. But this time, it didn't hurt. It settled. Because finally, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the help. I wasn't the joke. I was the one who handed them the keys. It's funny how quickly a room full of judgment turns into a room full of questions. But I didn't owe them answers. Not tonight. All I wanted was for them to see. Really see. Because I built every brick of this place. Every fixture, every thread in the sheets. And while they were busy pretending to be somebody, I became somebody they couldn't ignore. And the best part? I wasn't even done yet. When the truth finally lands, the room doesn't always erupt. Sometimes it just folds in on itself, soft, quiet, like a balloon losing air. And all the people who once looked so loud? They get real small, real fast. That was this moment. And I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to finish the story. The room stayed frozen for another full minute. No one dared speak first. Tadeo was the one to finally break the silence, his voice low, unsteady, like a kid who got caught cheating on a test. Camila, you should have told us. I tilted my head, not out of anger, but something closer to amusement. You never asked. Simple. Honest. And more than enough. Prince Fraser cleared his throat like he had something clever to say. He didn't. Nova was suddenly very interested in her wineglass. She stirred the remaining sip like it had answers. Elena Sawyer fanned herself even though the AC was on full blast. Avoidance comes in all forms. And then, like clockwork, they each opened the folders Kate Mendez had passed out. Inside? A detailed invoice of their stay, a 30% late booking surcharge, clearly outlined in red, a full breakdown of amenities used, from imported wines to monogrammed linens, a personalized note, "Thank you for staying at Bliss Keys by Camila Ware. For future bookings, use the code REUNION25, pending approval." Yes, pending approval. Because not everyone gets a second invitation. Arthur Grant, old school, prideful, usually the loudest voice at any family gathering, just stared at the numbers. Then he looked at me, eyes soft. "You really did all this on your own?" I nodded. Calm. No need to convince him. Every property. Every decision. Every dollar. He gave a slow nod. No congratulations. No tears. But respect? That was new. And I felt it settle in the air like dust on a sunny windowpane. I started to walk toward the door, heels clicking on the marble, folder still in my hand. Then I paused. Turned back over my shoulder. Caught Nova's eyes just long enough to watch her shrink half an inch. "Oh, and the towels you were complaining about?" "Egyptian cotton. 1,200 thread count." I smiled. "Soft. Clean. You're welcome." And with that, I walked out. No slamming doors. No mic drops. Just quiet footsteps through a house I built with everything they said I lacked. Back at the cottage across the street, I stood by the window one last time. Watched them all begin to scatter, half embarrassed, half in awe. Some tried to gather their things quickly. Others lingered in the rooms, whispering like the walls might tell on them. They were different now. Because the version of me they built in their heads didn't match the one who handed them the bill. I didn't walk away angry. Not even a little. Because I wasn't walking away at all. I was walking forward, into whatever came next. Fully seen. Fully me. No longer the one left out of the photo. Or seated behind the pillar. Or told to bring my own blanket. Now I was the one who chose who got invited next time. And more importantly, who didn't. Some victories don't come with confetti. No applause. No standing ovation. Just stillness. A moment. A room you built yourself, with nobody there to take the credit. And that's when it really hits you. You didn't need them to clap. Because you were always the damn show. It was just after midnight when I got back to my downtown loft. The lights from the skyline twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows like stars that knew my name. I slipped off my heels, pulled my curls into a loose bun, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. Poured some ginger tea. Just the way Miss Ora used to make it, no honey, just heat and soul. Then I walked over to the couch and opened my laptop. On screen, the live security feed from the lake house was still rolling. Most of the family had packed up early. Probably couldn't sleep. A few were lingering in the kitchen. Quiet now. No more bragging, no more shade. Just reflection. Maybe even a little regret. But I didn't need apologies. Not from people who only noticed me when they had to. I clicked end stream, closed the tab, and sat back. A knock at the door. Rio Pearson stepped in, holding a sleek white folder with gold trim. "You want me to prep the Paris deal?" he asked, grinning. I raised an eyebrow, sipped my tea. "Not yet. Let's let them Google me first." He laughed, nodded, and left me alone with the city and my thoughts. On the coffee table sat my leather-bound journal. Worn edges. A few old hotel keys tucked between the pages. The front cover? Next moves. I picked up a pen. Opened to a fresh page. Wrote 3 words across the top in bold, black ink, by the vineyard. Why? Because I remembered Aunt Elena once saying, owning land is classy, but vineyards? That's legacy. Fine. I'll buy the whole vineyard. And name the wine we're house red. Let M sip on that next year. They excluded me because they thought poverty was permanent. That struggle meant stuck. That renting meant failure. But sometimes, the best revenge isn't yelling. Or clapping back. Or rubbing it in. It's giving them a place to stay, just long enough to realize whose name is on the deed. Let M take selfies in your foyer. Let M brag in your hallway. And when the lights flicker on and the truth shows up on every screen, let them sit in the silence. The silence you earned. She closes the laptop. Sets her tea down. Stares out over the city lights one last time. Because this life? I built it from the floor up. And I didn't just find my seat at the table. I bought the whole damn house. If you've ever been underestimated, forgotten, labeled less than, remember this, you don't have to fight for a seat at the table. Build the house. Own the keys. Then let them walk through the front door and realize it was always yours. If you felt that. Like, comment, and subscribe. I read every message. Would you have opened the door? Or left them on the porch? Let's talk.